Something big just came out of Cleveland, and it's starting to shake conversations across the entire NFL. A few days ago, Browns running back Quan Jenkins sat down for an interview, and what he said is now spreading fast among fans, analysts, and insiders. At first glance, it sounded like a simple comparison between two head coaches, just another football discussion. But the deeper people looked at Jenkins' words, the more they realized this wasn't just about coaching styles. It was about revealing what may have really been happening inside the Cleveland Browns locker room. The conversation centered around former Browns coach Kevin Stefanski and the team's new leader Todd Monken. On the surface, it was framed as a simple difference in personality, but Jenkins' comments hinted at something much deeper, something that could explain why Cleveland struggled for so long and why the organization suddenly feels completely different now. Because according to someone who actually steps onto the field every Sunday, the Browns may have quietly entered a brand new era, and the change inside that building might be bigger than anyone expected. The moment that really caught everyone's attention in the interview came when Quan Jenkins described his new head coach Todd Monken using three simple words: a player's coach. Now, on the surface, that phrase might sound like a normal compliment. Coaches get praised all the time in interviews. Players say nice things about leadership constantly. But inside professional football, calling someone a player's coach carries a much deeper meaning than most fans realize. In the NFL, those words are almost like a badge of trust. A player's coach is someone who connects with the locker room, someone who communicates clearly, someone who makes players feel like they're part of the mission instead of just pieces on a chessboard. And according to Jenkins, that's exactly the type of energy Monken is bringing into the Cleveland Browns building right now. He explained that the first conversations he had with Monken were not what he expected. Instead of a distant or quiet leader, he described a coach who was openly communicating his vision for the team. A coach who was vocal about what he wants the Browns to become. Someone who talks directly to players about expectations, goals, and the direction of the franchise. That kind of communication might sound simple, but in professional sports, it's incredibly important. NFL locker rooms are filled with elite athletes, strong personalities, and players who want to know exactly where they stand. When a coach can clearly explain the mission and get players to buy into it, that's when teams start to transform from a group of individuals into a unified roster. But here, where things get interesting. When Jenkins praised Monken as a player's coach, he wasn't just complimenting the new leader. There was an unspoken message buried in that statement. Because if the new coach is bringing a completely different energy into the building, it naturally raises questions about the previous one. Former Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski led the team for several seasons, but the relationship between him and the locker room was often questioned by fans and analysts alike. And while players rarely speak openly about those dynamics, Jenkins' comments hinted that the difference between the two coaching styles might be much bigger than people originally thought. And once that idea started circulating, it opened the door to a much bigger question about what was really happening behind the scenes in Cleveland. What makes Quan Jenkins' interview even more interesting is that it didn't just reveal what players feel inside the locker room. It also validated something Browns fans have been saying for years. For a long time, the relationship between Kevin Stefanski and the fanbase of the Cleveland Browns always felt complicated. Now, to be fair, Stefanski had moments of success in Cleveland. There were seasons where the team showed real potential. The offense had flashes of creativity, and the Browns even made a playoff push during his tenure. On paper, those accomplishments should have made him a beloved figure in the city. But that connection with the fans never fully developed. Week after week, the reaction from the stands and online communities told a different story. Browns supporters constantly questioned play-calling decisions, leadership choices, and the overall direction of the team. The frustration wasn't just about wins and losses. It was about the feeling that something inside the organization wasn't clicking the way it should. And here's the thing about sports fans. People often underestimate how sharp their instincts can be. Fans watch every game. They analyze every decision. They see how players react on the sidelines, how the team carries itself during adversity, and how the energy around the franchise shifts over time. When tens of thousands of people begin to feel that something is off with leadership, that feeling usually comes from patterns they've been observing for months or even years. In Cleveland, that sense of disconnect kept growing. Supporters felt like the team lacked identity at times. Some believed the locker room energy seemed flat during difficult stretches. Others argued that the communication between coaching staff and players didn't always translate onto the field. Of course, none of that was officially confirmed at the time. Players rarely speak openly about internal dynamics while a coach is still in charge. The NFL is a league where athletes are trained to give safe answers and avoid controversy. But now that the Browns have moved forward with Todd Monken leading the team, comments like the ones Jenkins made are giving fans a completely different perspective on the past. Because if the new coach is already creating stronger relationships with the locker room, it suggests that the issue may not have been the roster. It may have been the leadership style guiding it. And once that possibility enters the conversation, it completely changes how people view the final years of the Stefanski era in Cleveland. The most revealing part of Quan Jenkins' interview wasn't just the comparison between coaches. It was the way he described the atmosphere inside the building since Todd Monken took over leadership of the Cleveland Browns. According to Jenkins, the biggest difference right now isn't necessarily about schemes, playbooks, or even strategy. It's about communication and presence. He explained that Monken came in with a very clear vision for the team. Instead of keeping things quiet or distant, he openly talked to players about what he wants the Browns to become. He laid out expectations, goals, and the direction he plans to take the organization. That might sound like basic leadership, but in a professional locker room, it matters a lot more than people realize. NFL players are some of the most competitive athletes in the world. They spend countless hours preparing, studying film, and pushing their bodies to the limit. What they want from a coach isn't just a playbook. They want someone who can lead them, motivate them, and make them feel like they're part of the bigger mission. That's the environment Jenkins described under Monken. He talked about how the new coach isn't distant or robotic. Instead, he interacts with players directly. He communicates openly. He makes sure everyone understands the plan moving forward. That kind of leadership creates a different energy in the room. Players start feeling like their voices matter, and that connection can change the entire culture of a team. Now compare that to the atmosphere that reportedly existed during the later years of Kevin Stefanski tenure. Again, Jenkins didn't directly attack the former coach. Players rarely do that publicly. But when you listen closely to how he described the difference between the two regimes, the contrast becomes hard to ignore. Under Monken, players are talking about vision, communication, and trust. Those three elements are the foundation of any successful NFL locker room. When a team believes in its coach, something powerful happens. Players start competing harder for each other. Accountability increases. Leaders emerge inside the locker room, and suddenly the entire organization begins moving in the same direction. That's why Jenkins' comments are being discussed so heavily right now. Because if the Browns have finally found a coach who can unite the roster, it could change the trajectory of the franchise in ways that go far beyond one season. But that raises an even bigger question about what happens when a coach loses that connection with his players in the first place. In the NFL, talent alone isn't enough to build a winning team. Every roster in the league is filled with elite athletes who were stars in college and the best players on their previous teams. What separates successful franchises from struggling ones often comes down to something far less visible: trust inside the locker room. And that's where the comments from Quan Jenkins start to carry even more weight. When players describe a coach like Todd Monken as a player's coach, they're not just talking about personality. They're talking about leadership that builds trust. A coach who communicates clearly, respects his players, and makes them feel valued can unite an entire roster around one shared goal. But the opposite is also true. When a coach begins to lose that connection with the locker room, things can unravel quickly. Players may still show up to practice. They'll still run the plays and go through the motions during games. But the extra effort, the kind of effort that wins close games in the fourth quarter, often disappears. In professional sports, belief is powerful. When athletes truly believe in their coach, they fight harder through injuries, adversity, and losing streaks. They trust the system even when things aren't going well. That belief creates resilience inside the team. Without it, every loss becomes heavier. The smallest mistakes start creating frustration. Players begin questioning decisions. Confidence inside the building slowly fades, and before long, even a talented roster can look completely disconnected on the field. That's why leadership is so important in a league like the NFL. During the later years of Kevin Stefanski's time with the Cleveland Browns, many fans sensed that something along those lines might have been happening. The team had talent, yet consistency was often missing. Games that looked winnable slipped away. Momentum would appear one week and disappear the next. At the time, it was difficult to know exactly why. But comments like the ones Jenkins made are now giving people a new lens through which to understand those seasons. If the connection between coach and players wasn't as strong as it needed to be, that alone could explain a lot of the instability fans witnessed. Meanwhile, the arrival of Monken appears to be resetting that dynamic completely. Players are embracing the new leadership. They're responding to his communication style. And perhaps most importantly, they're starting from a place of trust instead of skepticism. And if that trust continues to grow, it could completely reshape what the Browns look like moving forward. What's especially interesting about Quan Jenkins' comments is that the new era under Todd Monken hasn't even fully started yet. The season hasn't unfolded, the wins and losses haven't been recorded, and the real pressure of the NFL schedule hasn't arrived. And yet, according to players inside the Cleveland Browns building, the atmosphere already feels completely different. Jenkins described the new head coach as someone who is getting love in the room. That phrase might sound casual, but inside a professional locker room it carries serious meaning. It suggests that players are embracing the new leadership instead of questioning it. It means the coach is entering the season with something incredibly valuable: trust. But Jenkins also made it clear that this trust isn't permanent. In the NFL, respect is something a coach has to earn every single day. Players might start off optimistic about a new leader, especially after a change in regime. But that goodwill only lasts as long as the coach continues proving himself. Every practice, every game plan, and every decision contributes to whether that relationship grows stronger or begins to fade. Still, starting from a place of genuine support gives Monken a huge advantage. When players believe in the direction of the team, everything else becomes easier. They listen more closely during meetings. They buy into the system being installed. Veterans help younger players understand the culture being built. Slowly, a sense of unity starts forming inside the locker room. And that's exactly what Cleveland has been searching for. For years, the Browns have had talented players but struggled to maintain consistent success. The roster has gone through countless changes, and several coaching staffs have tried to unlock the potential of the franchise. But sustained winning in the NFL requires more than talent. It requires alignment between leadership and players. Monken appears to understand that from the beginning. According to Jenkins, the new coach is vocal about his goals, clear about his expectations, and committed to building real relationships with the roster. That kind of leadership style can transform the environment around a team. It creates accountability without creating distance, and it encourages players to fully invest in what the coach is trying to build. For Cleveland, that could be the foundation of a completely new chapter. But while the Browns are moving forward with renewed optimism, another team in the NFL might be stepping into the exact situation Cleveland just escaped. While the Cleveland Browns are moving forward into what looks like a completely new chapter under Todd Monken, the story doesn't end in Cleveland. Because the coach who previously led the Browns didn't just disappear from the NFL landscape. After leaving Cleveland, Kevin Stefanski found a new opportunity with the Atlanta Falcons. And that's where Quan Jenkins' comments suddenly become much more significant. When a player publicly praises a new coach as a player's coach, it naturally raises questions about the leadership style of the previous one. Jenkins never directly attacked Stefanski, but the contrast he described between the two coaches is hard to ignore. If the Browns' locker room feels more connected now, it suggests that the dynamic during the previous era may not have been as strong as it needed to be. That's the part Falcons fans should probably pay attention to. Coaching success in the NFL isn't just about designing clever plays or calling the right formations. Some of the most successful head coaches in league history built their reputations on leadership first. They created environments where players felt respected, motivated, and fully invested in the system. Without that connection, even talented teams can struggle. And Atlanta is entering a very important period for its franchise. The Falcons have been trying to rebuild their identity and become competitive in a difficult conference. Bringing in a coach with experience can help accelerate that process, but only if the leadership style resonates with the players inside the locker room. Now, to be fair, coaches can grow. It's entirely possible that Stefanski learned from his time in Cleveland and adjusted how he approaches player relationships. Many coaches evolve throughout their careers, especially after facing challenges in previous stops. The version of Stefanski that arrives in Atlanta might be very different from the one that left Ohio. But Jenkins' interview has still placed a spotlight on the situation. Because when a player who experienced both environments describes such a noticeable difference in leadership style, people around the league start paying attention. Front offices, analysts, and fans begin asking questions about what really happened behind the scenes. And as the new NFL season unfolds, those questions will likely follow both franchises very closely. While most of the attention from the interview focused on the coaching comparison, another part of the conversation unexpectedly sparked debate across the NFL community. During the discussion, Quan Jenkins was also asked about rising quarterback Shedeur Sanders, and that part of the interview quickly caught the attention of fans online. But the controversy didn't really come from Jenkins' answers. Instead, many supporters of Sanders felt the questions themselves were being framed in a way that pushed a certain narrative. The interviewers repeatedly brought up Sanders' personality, his confidence, and the perception some people have about his swagger on the field. For some viewers, that line of questioning felt unnecessary or even biased. Jenkins, however, handled the situation carefully. Rather than criticizing Sanders or feeding into any negativity, he spoke about confidence in a very different way. He explained that players at the highest level of football have to believe in themselves. In fact, that kind of self-belief is often what separates elite athletes from everyone else. According to Jenkins, confidence shouldn't automatically be mistaken for arrogance. In professional sports, especially at the quarterback position, swagger is often part of what allows players to perform under pressure. A quarterback has to step into the huddle, command the respect of teammates, and believe he can make the biggest plays when the game is on the line. Without that mindset, it becomes almost impossible to succeed in the NFL. Jenkins even pointed out that Sanders' personality makes sense when you consider his background. Being the son of Deion Sanders, one of the most confident and charismatic athletes in football history, means that swagger has always been part of the environment he grew up in. For Jenkins, that confidence isn't a problem. It's part of what makes Sanders special. Still, the exchange highlights something important about interviews like this. The way questions are asked can influence how answers are interpreted. Sometimes players find themselves responding to narratives they didn't create, simply because those topics dominate the conversation. And in this case, many fans felt the focus should have remained on the bigger revelation from the interview, the one about the coaching culture shift happening in Cleveland. Because when you strip away the side conversations and controversies, Jenkins' main message was still very clear. Something inside the Browns organization has changed. When you step back and look at everything Quan Jenkins revealed in that interview, one thing becomes clear. The Cleveland Browns aren't just changing coaches. They're trying to change the entire culture of the organization. For years, Cleveland has been one of the most unpredictable teams in the NFL. The roster has often been filled with talent, yet the results haven't always matched the expectations. Fans have watched seasons begin with hope only to end in frustration, wondering why the pieces never seem to fully come together. That's why the leadership change matters so much. Bringing in Todd Monken wasn't just about installing a new offensive philosophy or tweaking the playbook. According to Jenkins, it's about creating an environment where players feel connected to the mission of the team. It's about building relationships that make the locker room stronger instead of divided. In the NFL, culture can be the difference between a team that collapses under pressure and one that thrives in difficult moments. When players trust their coach, they're willing to push themselves further. They fight harder during close games. They hold each other accountable when mistakes happen. That kind of unity often shows up in subtle ways: better communication on the field, stronger leadership from veterans, and a team that refuses to give up when adversity hits. That's the type of environment the Browns appear to be trying to create now. Jenkins' comments suggest that players are already responding positively to the new leadership. They're listening, they're buying into the vision, and they're giving their new head coach the benefit of the doubt as the season approaches. Of course, none of this guarantees immediate success. The NFL is brutally competitive, and every season presents new challenges. Injuries, tough schedules, and unexpected setbacks can derail even the most promising teams. But starting from a place of trust inside the locker room gives Cleveland something they may have been missing before: a foundation. And that foundation could be the key to whether this new era truly transforms the franchise. Because if the connection between players and coaches remains strong, the Browns might finally have the leadership structure they've been searching for all along. And if that happens, the ripple effects could change the trajectory of the entire organization for years to come. In the end, the interview from Quan Jenkins revealed much more than a simple coaching comparison. It offered a rare glimpse into what the players inside the Cleveland Browns are actually feeling as the franchise moves into a new chapter. According to Jenkins, the biggest difference under Todd Monken isn't just strategy or play design. It's the connection between the coach and the locker room. That connection is the foundation of every successful team in the NFL. When players trust their coach and believe in the vision being presented, the entire organization moves with a different kind of energy. Cleveland appears to be building that trust right now. Meanwhile, the spotlight will remain on Kevin Stefanski and whether his next chapter proves the critics wrong. One thing is certain: the story unfolding in Cleveland is far from finished, and the entire league will be watching closely to see how this new era truly plays out.